Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining. We are very excited to be joined today by Andrew Thut from Forefront. We're excited to talk through what's been going on kind of in the company and get a general kind of feel for what you're seeing coming up in terms of the cannabis landscape. A good reminder for anybody out there who's joining us, if you're joining us from whatever platform, if that's YouTube, X, LinkedIn, anything, feel free to put in comments in the chat and we'll be able to get to them as we go through. With all that said and that reminder out of the way, also, hey guys, how you doing? Great to see you. Andrew, thanks so much for joining. Appreciate it. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm great.
I was going to ask because
it's a busy year, but I'm very excited for what's ahead, and I think 24 has a lot in store for this industry. So
super excited.
Fingers crossed on a lot of different fronts.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask because I feel like it's been a little bit. So I was going to say, like, how's your year going so far? But you have had yourself even a busy year, just changing positions. Becoming CEO officially. How's that been? What's it been like? Different?
Well,
Same?
it's been great. I've been every day in the business on the operating side. As many folks know, I've been involved with Forefront for almost a decade at this point. So it was mostly on the capital raising, capital market side, strategic side. And the board asked me, Leo, who was our former CEO, his family's Leo and his family are one of our largest shareholders. But being a public company CEO isn't really what Leo wanted to do long term. He's a cannabis operator, so he's still very involved in the business. And the board asked me to do it right around Christmas time, and I've absolutely loved it. It's so invigorating being in the business, seeing the low hanging fruit that you can make better. A lot of opportunities. So having a great time with it so far.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's definitely great to have somebody who's been in the company for a long time, who really knows the space in general, but also knows the company and is really able to kind of build from that knowledge. I think that's hugely important and just very cool. So congratulations as well from me.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, then I wanted to talk just before we get into Forefront a little bit more in depth about the year itself so far and the cannabis, landscape kind of generally high level. How are you feeling about the year so far, cannabis wise?
I feel terrific about the year. We had a pretty good January across the board. Including Washington, we had one of our best months in at least a year. So demand was pretty good in January, and February is always sort of a lull, and then you sort of get into March and 420, and you're off into the summer. So it's been a pretty good year so far. Pricing seems to be relatively stable. There are high hopes for something might actually happen in DC. So I think that 23 was a rough year, in the industry and for us at Forefront too, as we went into California. Retreated because it was simply an issue of, we couldn't invest incremental capital in that state. It didn't make any sense. And so that was expected to be a growth engine for us. And, it didn't make sense for us to be in that market. And then the second thing we had going was we have this big facility in Illinois, which was about 15 months getting online because of power. And so, I think as we've turned the page into 24, we're out of California, which took a lot of time and effort and attention. And, we can focus full tilt on, what we have going in Washington, Massachusetts, and Illinois, which I think just in those three states, I think we have an opportunity to double the size of the company. So we turned on Matson a couple weeks ago. We finally got power to that thing, which was just excruciating. Mind-boggling, to be honest. But we expect to have production out of there, the first production out of there in late April, early May. Flower starting to come out of there in midsummer. So got that online and going, which is a huge deal for us. And then as we look at Illinois, we have the opportunity to have 10 retail stores. So we have our third retail store opening in April. And then we've got, the licenses for 4 and 5 coming behind it. So we want to be continuing to have a wholesale presence and to expand that retail presence in Illinois. It's a huge growth opportunity for us.
That's awesome. All right. So it's good to hear. I feel like you're right. The industry did have a little bit of a trouble in 2023, but it does feel like we're on the right path now. I do want to definitely get more into the state story side of things, but would love to first, just really quickly, talk just a little bit more about the legislative components. I know nobody knows dates. I know nobody knows times. But I would want to talk just quickly about, I think in like late 2022, people were very excited about SAFE. We saw kind of a similar trend where there was a lot of, inflows into the industry. People were getting very excited. Would love to
Hmm.
just hear, how do you think this is different? Is it different? I don't know. First, kind of high
I think
level.
it is different. And I think the biggest thing that the industry has going for it, and we were talking in the green room before,
Yeah.
I think what's different this time is that, I'd historically asked, the advocates who have been around cannabis all their lives, and, in previous iterations of DC reform, they'd sort of say, don't get your hopes up.
Sure.
And currently, all the information feeds I'm getting are all saying, yeah, something's happening.
Mhm.
And the Democratic politicians are starting to chirp, about, oh, we're pushing for rescheduling and oh, we're pushing for safe banking, which typically means, they're going to be made to look good down the line.
Mhm.
So, Biden, is as we all are starting to realize, is really having a problem with particularly the young voters. And so,
Yes.
he's doing stuff with student debt. And the narrative that I'm hearing, and it's been corroborated, is that, cannabis is going to be one of those issues that he really champions going into the election. And so in order to do that, he needs to get going. So we need to see, something from the DEA sooner rather than later so that they can get into rulemaking and actually get this established and have it be something that he can actually run on. And so um, no one can pin down a date, but, I think that generally people are thinking that it's going to be a Schedule 3.
Mhm.
Which would be a massive deal for us in terms of, tax implications alone. But getting that availability to capital into the industry is, there's been sort of a chicken and the egg problem in the industry. It's like, well, the growth is kind of slowed down because there's been no capital, and so there's been no capital because there's no growth, and it's still federally illegal.
Yep.
So I think that there's a very high probability that we get something on rescheduling sooner rather than later.
Yep.
And I think it's going to be a massive boon for us. But, the markets people are saying, well, why aren't the markets discounting that? And I think it's just a once bitten, twice shy scenario. The markets have been head fake so many times. They say, you know what? When it hits the tape, I'll buy. And if I miss the first 50% move, I should have, multiple baggers after that.
Mhm.
And so I'm just going to wait. And frankly, they've been paid to wait.
Yeah.
So, but so that's on the rescheduling front. I think
Mhm.
it's a probability that happens sooner rather than later, from everything I'm hearing. And then the other piece on the federal side is that I'm hearing that a bipartisan um, group from the Senate and the House have basically are putting the final touches on a safe banking bill. Um, And it sounds like, Senator Warren was on a
Mhm.
podcast last week where she had winks and nods that, it was probably going to be attached to a bill rather than, pass through, both chambers of the House. And so that all adds up, attaching this to an omnibus must pass bill. Um, and they've been quietly working on it. So we could get, what Todd Harrison refers to as the trifecta, which is, safe banking, rescheduling, and then a Garland memo from the Department of Justice, framing the new ground rules for cannabis. And so all of that happens this year, and in a normal market, people would be getting super duper excited about it, and I think people are really tuned in these days. But they're waiting to see it to believe it.
I think that's really fair, especially unfortunately on the safe front. I know that's more like a 5 times bitten, twice shy kind of story,
Yeah.
but the DA stuff is new, and that seems like that's pushing ahead. Garland memo, that seems very plausible given that we've seen it kind of in the past. But yeah, hopefully we see them kind of all
What's
in cross.
inexplicable is that we're 3 years into a Biden presidency, and I think everyone's just caught so far off guard with that.
Uh,
That, they've been, 3 years, and 2 of which
yeah.
he had a fully blue Congress, House and Senate, and they didn't move anything, which was just like everyone said, "Oh, forget it." But, you know
Cynically, do you think it's one of those things where, it is in his campaign promises and all these things, but he didn't feel pressure from it because he was doing fine. Everybody still sort of felt like, he's sort of a not compromise choice, but like, he's fine, palatable. But now that it's kind of closer to the election, he really might need to cash in those, not cash in
I
points,
I
but
absolutely think that's true.
okay, I'll say.
And you also have to realize, like, Biden Biden stunk on this issue his whole career.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
Biden was one of the original drug warriors. He was
Right.
the, minimum sentencing guy and, tough on drugs. And, you know, he's an old guy. He's 80,
Yeah.
81 years old. And so, I don't think that this was a front and center thing. I think he's realized that, the ground has shifted and he's not on the right side of where his electorate is right now. And I think he's trying to, you know, have as many bridges as possible with younger folks.
Yeah. I
And it's a popular issue.
No, 1,000%. I mean, with young and old people, but it definitely gets the young people, voting more, I
Yeah.
think, in general. I do also think so I know it is sort of a political play for the next election, but I think also separately like that of that, I think it is also sort of a legacy component. You're saying he had done a lot of damage with his previous policies. I definitely agree. I think it is sort of the thing that not one of the things, but he can really say, I did this. This was my impact in my presidency. I know I I don't know. I think it could be potentially also a legacy component. We'll see depending on how the polling looks.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. Very
I
cool.
agree with you. I agree with you. And we just need to see it. And every week that
Yep.
goes by, I'm sort of more surprised. I was like, wow, nothing this week again. I'm really
Well,
surprised by that. Just as a
that's
observer of DC.
yeah, it's wild. Well, we've got another day this year with the leap year, so maybe that'll give us some extra time to get something done. We'll see.
Fingers
All right.
crossed.
Well, then I would love to talk. So, kind of broad, high level. You're very
Yeah.
focused on the strategy of Forefront and how you guys are managing this year. High level. What's your focus? How are you guys running? Before we get kind of into the state side of things.
Yeah. I've never felt better about having like where we are as a company in terms of having the right management and the right seats.
Mhm.
Um, as a guy who's really, you know, starting in the fall, really been in the operations every single day. Um, I I'm incredibly jazzed about, what we can do. One of the things about Forefront that, people don't really know, it's like, yes, we're small, but we have some real chops in, really competitive markets. And, we are, somewhere between mid and high single digit market share in Washington state. We have some of the highest volume dispensaries here in Massachusetts, one of the highest volume dispensaries in Illinois. So, we're an interesting play in that we have very proven chops, but a pretty small footprint right now. And
Mhm.
so I think the good news there is that we've got a lot of growth. And when you look at the Forefront story, the growth doesn't have a lot of complexity to it. It's like, it's not like, oh, we're going to get into this state and that state and we got to develop this. It's like, no, looking at the states we're in, let's put Washington aside because Washington, has fairly limited growth because you can't be vertically integrated.
Mhm.
But in Illinois, we can, have an additional, as I said earlier, we've got an additional, store coming on in April. We've got this big facility that everyone's been waiting on for 18 months coming online. Power got delivered a week or two ago. And all of a sudden Massachusetts is looking like, there might be some real growth in that state. So without getting into the state specific stuff, this is nothing is easy in cannabis ever. So I don't want to say
Sure.
it's easy. I want to say it's simple. It's a very simple strategy of, expanding where we can in Massachusetts, including expanding our wholesale, spiffing up our brands, and stamping out retail and continuing to ramp our wholesale in Illinois. And if we do that effectively, we can more than double the size of our company just where we are. And so that's without, talking about additional states. Now, if we get into a different environment where capital's more available, would we consider expanding past that? Maybe. But right now we feel like um, we've got a great handle on our business, and wanted to sort of shake the dust at 23. The California thing took a lot of time.
I
You know,
believe it. Yeah.
not only getting into California, but trying to make California work. And then after we sort of realized, like, man, we can't afford to lose money here anymore.
Of course.
It took a lot of work to get out of California. And so, having that in the rearview mirror and allowing management to refocus on, these core states and spiffing up our brands, launching new innovative products, um, has really give us a shot in the arm. So um, I'm I'm pretty happy about what 24 could deliver for us.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So I would definitely commend you mentioned California. I would commend you on, making a pivot. I think, looking at the data and trying to just say, this isn't for us and making that change because it does take time, it takes work, but it's better for that long-term kind of growth story. Would
Those
love
are
to
tough
know.
decisions to make, Mackenzie.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, geez, we'd spend a lot of time and money doing that. And,
I,
having to say, yeah, we were wrong and, we need to move along. It's a tough decision to make, but I'm sort of proud of our organization that we,
yeah.
bit the bullet and moved along. And you really couldn't justify, spending, allocating capital into that
Mhm.
state, given its current construct, especially when you have such a clear, high ROIC avenue of growth building
That's
out,
great.
Illinois.
Yeah. No, no, I
And
think, yeah, it totally makes
it's
sense.
as simple as that.
No, no, I think that totally
But
makes sense.
it wasn't easy. Nothing in this industry is easy.
I think that is true, and I think that will unfortunately continue to be the theme even if we get legislative changes to some degree. But again, build strong companies, build strong teams, all those things, which is important. But you were mentioning, so if things change, maybe you guys would look to expand out to states. Are there any, lessons or things that you would look at differently for kind of vetting different states or markets that you'd want to be in
Well,
potentially?
I think that, we MSOs have generally, veered towards, states that had protected markets,
Mhm.
where, there are limited licenses or there is a competitive dynamic. Well, I mean, just limited license where they can go in and establish and they're well regulated. I think that, our mistake with California was, we had done so well out of our facilities in Washington that we sort of said, well, geez, and I said it a million times, like, we're uniquely qualified to go into California. And and California was a little bit different because it's not regulated.
Mhm.
And California and New York seem to be okay with lawlessness. And
Mm.
it's very tough to compete as a cannabis operator when when your competitors aren't playing by the same rules.
Yeah.
And so, I think that we kind of thought that we were uniquely qualified to get in given our experience in
Yeah.
mature markets. And I think that if our balance sheet had been a lot bigger, maybe we would have legged it out a little bit, but it was really hard to justify. So I think right now it's more of a stick to your knitting. It's like just
Mhm.
execute in the states you're in. But I'd like to be in an Ohio eventually, or a Texas, or even a
Oh,
Georgia. There's some of
yeah.
these states that I think are really appealing, especially the blue states,
Hmm.
where they sort of have those states have pretty good moats around them. And when you're looking at how the New York rollout went, I don't think
Yeah.
you're going to see that kind of stuff in Georgia and Texas. And
Yeah.
like it's New York, yeah. So I think you need to have a good regulatory framework, and you need to have good regulators.
Yeah.
And I frankly think like New York and California, like it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. Like if we're
Do you
gonna
think
have a legal industry, you got to regulate it and manage
I definitely agree. It's hard to play by different rules, especially yeah,
it.
it's when it's incredibly hard to play just even within the rules that you're given already. Out of curiosity, do you think New York or California, in 10 years, do they think they figure it out and they finally kind of get things under control? I know that's a
I think
long distance,
I
but
think New York has a shot.
okay.
I don't
Not
think
California.
California has a shot. Like I just don't. I don't know how a public. It's very hard for a public entity
Mhm.
to operate in California profitably without selling out the back door.
Mm.
And as a public company, you sort of have to, you know, go by the Cole memo. It's like, look, you got to be in unambiguous compliance in state laws. And we've always had the mantra is like, look, we need to be a very compliant industry. And I think California is going to be a really tough place to make money
Yeah.
as far as I can see. Graham and Kyle at Glass House, seem to have something going on that's good.
Mhm.
But the rest of that state's struggling.
Yeah. No,
It's
I
it's
definitely agree.
it's lack
Uh,
of regulation. It's a million different things.
yeah, fair enough. All right, well, then let's
Well,
talk
I think
maybe
I think New York can pull it out, but
okay.
they've got. I'm much more bullish on Syracuse, Albany, Rochester
The New
than I
York, New
am
York.
than I am New York City.
Yeah, that's fair, which sucks because I think, like, the density is so great, like, all that stuff seems perfect. I think some will be able to hack it out, but it is hard to compete,
Well, they let it
with
run wild, right? And
yeah.
it's tough to put that genie back in the bottle. If you had 6,000 illegal liquor stores, they would have done something about it, but they just sort of let it go.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure unfortunately, I don't think that there'll be an incident, but I'm sure there'll be something at some point that will scare people off. I would imagine, but I don't know. We'll see. But,
well, when you're in the business, Mackenzie, you realize how strict the testing is
mhm,
in Massachusetts, and Illinois is even more stringent. Like people, there ever since the vape scare, people
yeah,
sort of scared people straight on buying legal vapes, but you know, you don't know where that flower came from. You don't know where that vape came from. What's in that gummy?
mhm,
Um, I think that people are going to want the regulated market when they can, and Washington's sort of a poster child for that. Like the black market in Washington is not that rampant because they have a decent regulated market where prices are reasonable, but I think that I think consumers are going to be, continue to migrate towards regulated product.
yeah. No, I definitely agree, especially when you make it easy for them and, make it clear, I
And
guess,
it's
the
priced
differences.
reasonably and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
of
And
course, which
quality.
again oh, sorry, I was gonna say it would happen if we get some legislative changes as well to make it easier, to bring prices down potentially for them as well, but who knows? All right, well, then would love to talk we've mentioned it a few times, but would love to just dig a little bit more into Illinois, and I know, again, the new, flagship facility, would love to talk about that. How was power brought on? How is it officially I know you're saying it was delayed, but I think it's great that it's functional
Yeah.
now and
So, we had
kinda
built,
happening.
we kind of wanted a central hub in the middle of the country where, was basically the amalgamation of everything that we've learned growing over the last decade plus.
Mhm,
And so this facility in Matson, we had largely finished in April. And ComEd, who is the utility there, basically the timeline kept slipping and slipping and slipping.
mhm,
And to the point where, we're just like, oh my gosh, we had the mayor of the town of Matson in on the calls with us as we tried to get power to it.
okay.
And so, they had to take power lines across other people's property, and it was a big rigmarole. But
Mm,
finally, we're there. And so, power came on 2 weeks ago. We are, people on the ground right now commissioning the machines, bringing up the lighting, making sure stuff's working. And
nice.
then as we move into spring, we're going to start to migrate, the plants from our old facility into the new facility. And that flower is going to start coming out room by room starting midsummer. And ahead of that, we're going to be able to, do more processing. So half the market, as Mackenzie, is non-flower. So vapes, edibles, etc.
Mhm,
And so we've never had those product lines in Illinois. We have great flower in the market right now, but we haven't had that other half of the stuff in our wholesalers' suitcase to sell.
mhm,
So we plan on having that, by late spring, start to roll that out in the market. And then we're going to have up to, by the time it's all said and done, close to 70,000 square feet of canopy in that space. Where I think the one thing about Illinois is the flower. The flower is not really where it should be.
mm,
I think a lot of that is because of the testing limits in Illinois. They're so stringent that everyone irradiates, and
mm,
so which irradiation technologies come a long way, and it doesn't really break down the flower like it used to. So it's not as bad as it used to. But I think flower quality in Illinois still isn't where it's come along, but it still isn't where it needs to be.
yeah,
And so we have given the quality of our flower currently in the market and this facility that's coming online, we have every confidence that we're going to be able to have some of the better flower in that market. And the other thing about Illinois, which is awesome, and I haven't looked in a few weeks, somewhere around 170, 180 dispensaries in that state of 13 million people. That state could have another 400 stores, good stores. Um, Especially if you have states like Indiana that are going to continue to be prohibitionist.
yep,
So even though Illinois is it's not a new market to come online, but I think that there's a lot of growth, and we like the dynamics of that market a ton.
yeah,
And so our ability to take it from our two existing dispensaries to 10 having already made the big nut investment in the facility, allows us to grow revenue pretty substantially, with, fairly limited CapEx.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So in terms of building out to that 10 limit, so you guys are potentially opening another dispensary, I guess,
We're
sometime in
definitely opening in April.
okay, in
So it's,
April. Okay. Are you gonna be open, I guess, is the goal also around the 420
well,
like
they say the goal
US?
is late March, so I'm telling you mid-April.
Okay, that sounds
Um,
good.
and that's cannabis time. And then we
Yeah,
have a fourth and a fifth license on board behind it.
nice.
So, we're trying to be really, really thoughtful
Mhm.
about, we feel like we have a great idea of what makes a great cannabis dispensary, and it's not, on the Miracle Mile with foot traffic. Um, and that's a mistake that, a lot of folks made, and we made it. Our one of our dispensaries in downtown Brookline, it's our worst performing dispensary. Doesn't have parking.
Interesting.
Yeah. You would have thought like, oh my gosh, this thing's
Yeah,
gonna kill
right
it.
there.
And our best performing dispensaries are, Calumet City on the Indiana border in
Got it.
Illinois, and then our Georgetown facility, which is, up north of Boston, right off of 95, can do between $1.5 million and $2 million a month, parking forever. So we have a very good idea of exactly what kind of retail footprint we want,
Mhm.
and you know we don't have to have, poorly located stores. So we feel like we've got 7 really good bullets to shoot.
That's
Um,
awesome. Yeah, if I know anything about Midwesterners, they love to drive is one thing. They'll drive 6 hours. They're like, "Oh, I'll go to the store 6 hours away. That's fine. Easy peasy."
yeah. Well, the
Um,
nice thing about Illinois too is that you can be in power centers, right? You aren't stuck in the back of an industrial park because of ridiculous zoning like you have in Massachusetts.
yep.
You can be in a power center where people are swinging by for groceries and their prescriptions and pop in.
Yeah,
So um, it's a terrific market in a lot of regards, but particularly that one where you're not relegated to some crappy location where
sure.
people can't find you.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's great. Sounds like very posed for growth, which is
Mhm.
great. Poised for growth. Um, any trends that you can pull out in terms of what people in Illinois or even any of the other states are kind of interested in currently? I know there's been a big theme about, people trying to find really high value stuff, really searching kind of very price sensitive, I guess, a little bit. What's sort of the trends in terms of, how people are spending, form factors,
Yeah,
even?
I think people are definitely, across both straight, like we call it tack hunting. So it's
Mhm.
total available cannabinoid testing of the flower. So lower testing stuff is just tougher to move. So if your flower is testing, sub 20% THC, um,
They don't care.
it's
They don't want it.
it's tougher to move, and you have to really drop price. And if you have great flower that's testing above 25% and into the 30s, that stuff flies. So we're very tuned in to make sure we have not only affordable flower but quality flower.
Mhm.
And that's sort of the part of why we built this Matson and why we've continued to circle back on our facilities really across the country, making sure that our flower is great, because the price differential between low testing and high testing flower is becoming pretty stark in some states. The other thing that we're doing is, we are getting innovative um, with our vape hardware and also the offerings. People are asking for more live resin, live rosin, asking for diamonds, which is
Mhm.
effectively pure THC isolate that's put into oil.
Mhm.
And so we have 2 new vape SKUs coming out in the next couple months. One is called our Blast Bar, and another is called our Marma Bar, which is a flavored vape,
Mhm.
which we have really high expectations for. And we've done a lot of market research, and we're pretty bullish. And then I think the last thing that people love are on the pre-roll side, getting more creative with those. So
Mhm.
we have a terp stick, which is a 1 gram. Well, we've got 1 gram and half gram, but it's basically it's an infused pre-roll that we've been sprinkling diamonds into. And so you have a pre-roll that people can get a 1 gram that's testing in some cases close to 60%. And so
Wow.
that high test market is something that those things fly. And when people really are THC hunting, they aren't for me. It's for people are, oh, do you want to try this? It's like, no, it's a young
Yeah.
man's game. but those high testing pre-rolls are starting to fly. So we're doing a lot of stuff, and blunts we took off the market, and we're bringing it back next week with a new improved product. So we're very focused on making sure that we're being innovative and forward thinking on our non-flower stuff too.
Yeah.
And all of those will be hitting as we roll out the year here.
That's awesome. It's great to be responsive to what people want. I'm wondering, is it people who are wanting those very, very high concentration products and SKUs? Are those people who are like heavy users, and it's just a small group that spends a lot and wants that really, really intense, not intense experience, but I guess, higher levels of THC?
Well, I mean, you
Or is it
have an
both?
80-20 rule in cannabis
Okay.
where, 80% of your stuff is bought by 20% of your customers. And it's those, the customer range in general runs the gamut, but those high use are sort of, in their, 20 to 40-year-olds, in their 20s to 40s who, are looking for that. And look, like if you open a store on Newberry Street and, you have, the walk-in traffic or a soccer mom or whatever coming and buying like some edibles, great. So they bought $20 worth of edibles and they're going to have those for 2 months. Like that's not the customer you want.
Not your
Like
target.
the customer we'd like, because, we do want to convert people to cannabis from alcohol. And that trend is certainly going on.
Yep.
Um, my wife's dry January.
I was going to ask.
Well, I've had cannabis drinks for her every night. Like test this one and this one and this one.
Yeah.
It's a thing. And
Yeah.
drinks are only 1% of the market right now. And, am I flirting with the idea of drinks? Yeah, sort of. I mean, it's a tough business to get into, but like we're getting more and more converts from booze. It's the stigma. Like I've been in this 10 years now. People thought I was joking when I got into this industry. And now, cannabis is becoming ubiquitous, even in my, old man suburban parties. There's people drinking the drinks and people smoking and people vaping. And I think people like to get away from alcohol.
I think, yeah, people are sick of hangovers. I know every so often I'll still drink and it's sort of whatever, but I've noticed even just anecdotally with myself, much less. I think it's a lot
Hangovers
easier to have.
suck.
Yeah, they
They
really do.
suck.
There's no cure. Is there a cannabis product that you'd recommend as a hangover cure? What would be that? Anything? What would
I
dull the.
always I always just like one of our edibles when I'm hungover. Like I had a friend when I was hungover around Christmas. I said, I've been hungover all day. He sort of said,
Sure.
why'd you do that to yourself? Should have had an edible early. So, our Marmas, which, I'm are tried and true, which is our gummy, I
Yep.
think are a good cure.
There you go. I love it. All right. Good
Just
stuff.
a lot
All
of
right.
water.
Oh, yeah, there you go. That
Mm,
melts in perfectly.
yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, perfect. I think great sort of check-in terms of what's going on as a company. It seems like things are very, again, poised for growth, which is awesome to see. Again, we'll see in the legislative side, but everybody's kind of holding their breath for that, but not kind of, waiting on it as a guarantee at all. But it feels like things are moving in the right direction, which is great. Any final thoughts as we kind of wrap up?
No, I
Covered
think
it
we
all.
touched it all.
Yeah.
I think that you're going to see, continuing deleveraging of people's balance sheets. If you
Mhm.
get a decent capital market, and like in cases like ours, it's not a big quantum of capital. So we've done some stuff. Our Leo Gontmaker, our former CEO or board member, and his family, they just equitized $23 million of their senior debt, and so that's a $23 million all in bet on the equity. So yes, it was a little, if you had your druthers, would you like less dilution? Sure. But, as a shareholder, um, it's very good to see someone be so aligned.
Mhm.
So I think that you're just going to see balance sheets start to shape up this year as capital becomes available. And, you know, those of us that have been through the ringer, I think that we're very, very focused and, ready for some movement here federally. So high
Definitely.
hopes for 24.
High hopes. I love that. That's perfect. Love
Yeah,
the pun too. I'm going to count it.
yeah,
All right. Well,
yeah.
thanks for taking the time, Andrew. Really, really
No,
appreciate it.
Mackenzie.
Thanks
Thank
everyone for
you.
being here, and we'll catch you next time.
All right.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at advisorshares.com.